Welcome back to another episode of 40 Facts About the 40K Universe. I am your host, Gershwin, and you are watching One Mind Syndicate. Today we continue talking about the Badab War as we get into part 6. If you have not checked out the other parts, please click on the link above or below. That's going to take you to the playlist, which has the entire parts, or the series so far. And again, guys, sorry for my throat. Maybe I'll redo this later on if you really can't understand what I'm saying. But either way, let's get into 40 facts about the Badab War. Gargatha 3 was a feral world of poisonous fens and corrosive jungles. This heavily contested world soon turned into a savage battleground as the Raptors, Salamanders, and Fire Angels chapters clashed against the Astral Claws and the Mantis Warriors amid the tangled and often lethal vegetation. The war on Gargatha swiftly developed into a series of hit-and-run engagements of ambush and counterattack. The battle lines on Gargatha remain non-linear, except for a few scattered landmarks on half-overgrown exploratory bases and old smuggler outposts. The outcome of such vicious fighting was uncertain, and a high amount of casualties were sustained on both sides. Gargatha remained a contested world of vital strategic importance due to the planet being one of the few life-sustaining worlds in the region. The secessionist forces were finally displaced from the planet at the end of the year 907 of the 41st millennium, and the system reclaimed for the Loyalists. With the arrival of fresh reinforcements to replace them in the order of battle, the Marine Errant first took up reserve duty for the remainder of the year, before they finally withdrew entirely from the Badab War early in the year 907 of the 41st millennium, with some acrimony attached to their departure. The Firehawks chapter, who grew increasingly embittered, were forcibly retired to the rear guard for a time by the newly appointed Magister Militum, Lord High Commander Carbal Colm, in order to avoid further trouble in the ranks of the Loyalist forces. This redeployment of the Firehawks was proved particularly effective as the presence of their mighty Raptorous Rex at Hollow's Point ensured the security of the Loyalist facilities while under construction. The presence of the mobile Star Fortress soon proved vital when the Hollow Points were raided in the year 906 of the 41st millennium by secessionist vessels led by a trio of Lamenter chapter strike cruisers. The attack was repulsed without major damage to the half-finished base, as the concentration firepower of both the Raptorous Rex and the Red Scorpion's battle barge Sword of Ordon proved a decisive factor. The scales began to tip in the Loyalists' favor, as further reinforcement arrived almost month by month, with messages from the Adeptus Terra informing them that other Space Marine chapters were en route. Lord High Commander Colm knew that he must press his advantage soon or risk the war devolving into a slow battle of attrition that would bleed his forces dry. The first move forward would be the relief of the fortress world of Cerrad that stubbornly held out against the secessionist aggression by their heroic self-sacrifice and single bloody-minded faith in the God Emperor. The Raptors and Salamanders chapter were assigned the task of intervention by sending a select strike force dispatched on a long-range incursion missile behind secessionist lines. The Raptors covertly landed a strong force of battle brothers in field-modified armor over 300 kilometers away from their chosen target. Shunning heavy gear and vehicles in favor of reduced visibility to auspex and thermal detectors, the Raptors' war party launched a lightning assault under the cover of a blinding gale and succeeded in breaching the fortress walls of the main orbital defense complex with melta-bombs, gaining entrance. They then successfully sabotaged the base's weapon silos despite taking heavy casualties from a bitterly contested counterattack by the Astral Claws. With the way open, the two chapters' battle barges bombarded the planet from the upper atmosphere, smashing the secessionist-held positions into sunder and liberating Cerrad. The liberation of Cerrad marked a turning point in the war, as the Loyalists began to drive a potential wedge down the middle of the secessionist world. But before they could take advantage of this new game, dire news came from the Howling Griffin station at Kimara of a deadly new threat. Inquisitorial interrogation of the Astral Claw's apothecary, captured during the Battle of Cerrad's polar fortress, revealed to the general shock of the interrogators that the prisoner was not in fact an Astral Claw by origin at all, but in fact a former member of the Tiger Claws, a chapter long thought lost. The Astral Claws' hubris resulted in their chapter secretly absorbing the remnants of their long-lost successor chapter into their ranks, and ultimately led to Huron's dreams of expanding his chapter into a force with the strength of one of the Space Marine legions of antiquity, in order to pacify the Maelstrom Zone permanently and crush mankind's enemies. Some Imperial scholars contend that when the last remaining Tiger Claw survivors were taken into the Astral Claw's midst, these once loyal brothers grasped a poisonous viper in their heart, thus causing them to eventually cause them to fall from grace. Further dire and extreme methods were then unleashed in utter secrecy as a planned series of stalk and capture raids when engaged upon the covert Astartes and the inquisitorial forces operating within the Maelstrom Zone. Evidence was quickly amassed of an unforeseen and terrible heresy that would be pursued by the Astral Claws and Huron for more than a century. The tyrant had ordered the withholding of his chapter's gene seed tithes, not to replenish the chapter's own losses, but at first, in order to help save the remnants of the decimated ranks of their nearly extinct kin, the Tiger Claws chapter, which had sought sanctuary with them in secret. Huron and his fellows hid them within the Astral Claws' ranks. He then further compounded this sin by seeking to expand his own forces far past the levels mandated by the Codex Astarte. For at least 100 years before the outbreak of the conflict, the Astral Claws secretly attempted to transform their chapter slowly into a force equal to a Space Marine legion of old. In his monumental arrogance and pride, Huron sought at first not to rebel against the Imperium, but to prove his case by scourging the Maelstrom clean and establishing a new realm carved out for mankind in the name of the Emperor. To outside scrutiny, the tyrant placed Astral Claws detachments within the Tyrant's Legion's ranks before outbreak of the war as trainers, tasked with purging and improvement of the mediocre and often corrupted Planetary Defense Force armies of the Badab sector. But in reality, the Legion's tribunes were in all cases passed off as the force's commanders. This succeeded in concealing the true numbers of the tyrant's growing chapter from prying eyes, and enabled the Astral Claws to disperse this hidden force all across Huron's domain, hidden within the Tyrant's Legion. The betrayal of the Tyrant and the Astral Claws rapidly became apparent when the Badab War engulfed the Maelstrom Zone, as did the identity of the true commanders of the Tyrant Legions, who willingly followed their master without falter, taking up arms against any who would challenge the Tyrant's domains. Further covert investigation uncovered that the Astral Claws' apothecaries had also been conducting heretical experiments in rapid zygote cultivation, and while largely unsuccessful, thanks to the use of its untithed gene seed, the Astral Claws chapter stood at around an estimated 3,500 battle brothers strong. A disastrous defeat for the Loyalist forces in the early year of 907 of the 41st millennium would mark the bloodiest year of the conflict, for the bulk of the Executioners chapter had arrived in force in the Maelstrom Zone and immediately conducted immediate surprise attacks on Chimera. They succeeded in destroying the Loyalist outpost, listening stations, and vital astropathic relay complexes on the Night's Moon of Kirma's system in one stroke. The Howling Griffin's chapter forces garrisoning the Chimera system were outnumbered and overwhelmed, suffering greatly as their bastions and stations fell one after the other despite their tenacious defense. The Howling Griffins were systematically destroyed by the relentless onslaught of the Executioners from an unseen quarter. As the Howling Griffins' positions were being outrun and decimated on the airless Dust Moon, it fell to the dreadnought Confessor, Titus, to rally the beleaguered forces of his chapter. Unafraid of the firestorm around him, with implacable zeal, the venerable Dreadnought Chaplain led the desperate counterattack, which bought his chapter the chance to regroup and mount an effective fighting defense at the cost of his long life. After the executioners had finally withdrawn from the battlefield, the surviving Howling Griffins found that their foe had honored Tice's glorious sacrifice by laying out the wreck of his sarcophagus within a ring of broken weapons, placing one of their own shattered standards in a lifeless grasp of the fallen war machine. The death of the revered Dreadnought Confessor Titus struck a hammer blow to the Howling Griffin's morale. With the Chimera system's defensing platforms and listening stations destroyed, the executioner forces had achieved their primary objective. They could have pressed their advantage and utterly destroyed the Howling Griffin's outpost, but instead withdrew suddenly from the system, leaving the Howling Griffin's garrison with more than 70% casualties. This development provoked much concern from Huron, but mindful of the dangerous temperament of the executioner's commander, the High Chaplain Thulsa Kane, he was known to have stopped short of issuing any formal reprimand to them, and instead welcomed them into the battle of the secessionist cause. Despite the grievous losses dealt to them, the remainder of the Howling Griffin's task force continued to doggedly attack, refusing to shrink away from their responsibilities to the Loyalist cause, until formally relieved from the war in the year 909 of the 41st millennium. And those were 40 facts about the Badab War. I hope you guys are enjoying this series. Again, if you want to check out the full story, you don't want to wait for me to read, click on the link below. That's going to take you to the wiki page of the entire Badab War explained. And again, guys, thank you so much for liking, commenting, and sharing. Because of you, we can post videos every single day. If you want to support us a little bit more, jump on over to Patreon. A simple $1 a month helps us create more videos. With that said, I'll catch you guys tomorrow. This was Gersh1 with One Mind Syndicate, signing out.